So, can you really retire at 60 if you have $500,000 saved at age 50? Well, most people might tell you that the answer is no, and I totally get that. With inflation, market fears, and headlines constantly shouting that you should already have $1 million or more saved up, it's easy to feel like you're behind. But here's the truth: the real risk isn't just not accumulating enough money, it's also running out of time to enjoy those healthiest years of your life. And that's the most important part. In this video, I'm going to walk you through a real example, though. I'm going to show you a case of a real client that we worked with who started with $500,000 in savings at age 50, and then show you step by step how we built a plan so she could retire at 60. And you'll see it all laid out, actual numbers. I'll take you through software and show you a strategy that can grow your money, build those income bridges, and remove that fear of retiring early. If you're new to the channel, my name's Justin. I own a financial planning firm in Lewisburg, Pennsylvania, where we help retirees all across the country make smart financial decisions. And today I'm going to show you that retiring at 60 isn't really about hitting some magic number. It's about using your 50s wisely. And here's how you can do it. And here's the real issue. Most people at 50 with around $500,000 saved, they feel stuck. And it's not because they don't have a shot at retirement. It's because they've internalized three dangerous beliefs. The first one is $1 million saved already. I should have that now. And that's the minimum safe number to be able to make it at 60. And they've been told this for years. It feels like the truth, even if it isn't. The second belief is early retirement means extreme frugality and luck. Ramen, pork and beans. I had somebody say, hey, what's wrong with pork and beans? If you like pork and beans or ramen, that's fine. But you don't have to be extremely frugal or lucky to retire at 60. And retiring at 60 doesn't mean that you necessarily have to sacrifice lifestyle. And the third belief is that the market is too risky to trust in your 50s. And this is probably the most damaging one. So what a lot of people do in their 50s is they'll go a lot more conservative than they should at the exact moment that growth matters the most. And these beliefs trigger that retirement confidence gap where savers, they lose faith in their ability to act. And then every year you delay building that plan, you're trading active, healthy lifestyle years just for more spreadsheets, more anxiety, watching more YouTube videos, but just being paralyzed and not taking any action. And I'd say the financial industry itself, the headlines, they kind of want you scared. They like that because it helps sell products, it helps sell solutions, but they need clicks, they need eyeballs on your content. I want you confident. I don't want you scared of retirement. And confidence comes from having an actual plan. And so on that note, let's look at a case study from a client I worked with, Sarah. She had $500,000 at age 50, and we showed her a clear pathway to retirement at 60 using strategic tailored planning. And so a little background on Sarah. Sarah was 50 at the time. She was a physician's assistant here in Pennsylvania, earning about $126,000 a year, and she had $500,000 saved. And her goal was she wanted to retire at 60. She liked the job, but she found it stressful. She wanted to be able to say, hey, I'm done at 60. I want to do what I want to do. And now let's take a look at Sarah's data in the software so you can see how this all fits together. And so you can see her here. I have her as Sarah Sample. Just to protect her privacy, you can see she's 50 years old. And she wants to retire at age 60. She wants to spend $4,500 a month in retirement. And then healthcare, we're putting that as an annual cost as well. We're probably overshooting that, but that's okay. Rather overshoot it than undershoot it. She makes about $126,000 a year currently. And we did talk about part-time work. So she's stressed at her job because she has to be there every day. But she felt if she didn't have to be there all the time, if she could cut back to part-time, it's something she'd really still consider doing. She did have to put in a lot of education and training to get to where she is. So she doesn't want to just totally quit. She wants to have the option to do part-time work. So that's a lever we can pull for later. She's contributing 10% to her workplace retirement plan, and she spends about $4,000 a month right now, plus housing costs. Let's take a look at some of her other numbers. As I mentioned, she has $500,000 invested in her workplace retirement plan, and she's in a 50-50 investment mix. This is important and we'll touch on later. She wasn't sure how to invest her money at work. She just heard that, well, she's 50 years old. She shouldn't take too much risk. So that's about where she should be. And she never really made any adjustments after that. She also has a mortgage in retirement. That's something she's concerned about 170,000. She was fortunate enough to get a sub 4% mortgage, which a lot of people would be really jealous of now. So that is an advantage, but that's something she had questions on, and she has a small emergency fund. So she's wondering, should I be paying off my mortgage? Is that going to hurt me in retirement? Should I be putting more money into my workplace retirement plan? Should I be building up my emergency fund? Which one should I prioritize? How should I be invested? All that kind of stuff. So she just felt all this was overwhelming. It was leading to underconfidence. She's not sure what she should do. And when we look at all her statistics all together, the software is giving her a score of 30% probability of success. And what it's doing is it's running a Monte Carlo, which is taking 1,000 trials, good markets, bad markets, everything in between, and saying, okay, if Sarah wants to spend $4,500 a month plus annual healthcare cost, indexed, increase with inflation every single year, and never ever deviating from that, she has a 30% chance of doing that. And now in retirement, realistically, most retirees are going to make some kind of spending adjustment at some point, which is why you don't need a 100% Monte Carlo score. And I'll touch on that a little bit later, but we do want to improve from 30%. And let's look at what this actually looks like. So let's go to age 60 here. And based on what she's doing now, hypothetically, given past investment returns, she could be close to around $1 million to maybe 1.2 million at retirement. But as you can see, it starts to slowly erode once she's in retirement, and most of her averages tend downwards to her having a good probability of running out of money over time because she's either doesn't have a high enough balance or she's not getting the growth that she needs, or a mix of both. So what can we do to improve her probability? Well, what tweaks can we make? Well, first of all, what I want to look at is I want to see what's the room in the plan in the first place. So I love this waterfall chart. This lays out all the expenses. It shows where all the money's going. It's really nice, really cool. So we can see from her salary, we can see her expenses, living expense, $4,000 a month plus housing costs. We can see her taxes. We can see her saving of 10% to her workplace retirement plan. So if all these numbers are correct, this is telling us that she should have somewhere around $21,000 a year that could be better allocated elsewhere, which goes to the importance of knowing your numbers in the first place. If you don't know your numbers, you don't know how much room is in your plan. So now that we see this, we can give every dollar a job, so to speak. So now let's go back. I know I'm doing a little bit of clicking around on you, so I appreciate you sticking with me. What levers can we pull? What can we adjust? Well, we know she has room to increase her workplace retirement plan contributions. So let's do that. What does that do to our probability of success? All right, brings us up to 40%. Okay, we know she has a little bit more room. So let's say she makes $500 a month or $6,000 a year to contribution to her either emergency fund and or non-retirement account, because we want her to have some other source besides just pre-tax. So that brings her up to 51%. So let's take a look at the current allocation and see how we can change that. And I see this is common with a lot of retirees in their 50s. They'll tend to be a little bit more conservative and think that, well, I should start tailoring risk down. But in many cases, not getting the growth that you need is your biggest liability here. If you're 50, you may be in retirement for 30 to 40 years. You're definitely going to need growth to maintain your purchasing power. Just think how prices have increased and inflation's increased from 2020 up until now. And imagine that going over the next 30, 35 years. So let's change your allocation to, let's say, an 80-20 portfolio and see what happens. Okay, 71%. All right. And now what about in retirement? Now, a lot of retirees might say, well, I was aggressive leading up to, but now that I'm retired, I've hit the finish line and I have to go conservative. Let me protect everything and just put it in money market, CDs, fixed annuities. What happens if she does that in retirement? Well, now that drops her probability almost back down all the way to the original. And so that just goes back to my original point that even in retirement, once she's 60, she still could have 30, 35 years to go. She's definitely going to need some kind of growth. So let's say she has a 70-30-ish allocation, which a lot of research indicates that could be close to the sweet spot for many retirees. Again, everything should be evaluated based on personal circumstances, but 70-30 could be a very good optimal mix, all things being equal. That brings her up to 80%. So now we've made quite a bit of progress from 30 to 80. What else can we adjust? Well, let's take a look at the confidence here. Let's see how that's changed it. So if we go back to age 60, so now you can see she could have anywhere from maybe 1.2 to 1.5 on most averages. Again, hypothetically, we don't know what investment returns are going to be. But if you see her average lines here, they're either trending solid or mostly up. So if we follow the median outcome, she has way more at the end of retirement than she did at the beginning, which goes back to me saying why you don't need a 100% probability in Monte Carlo. If you have 90 to 100, it probably means you're not spending enough and you can make some good spending adjustments. So, but let's see what else we could do though. What if she wanted to work part-time for a couple years and just make a fraction of what she made before? What does that do to her retirement plan? Well, that's going to bump her up a good bit as well, 87%. And then we talked about debt, right? She was concerned about that. Right now, her current mortgage payment, she wouldn't pay it off till 2044. What if she allocated $600 extra a month to her payment? She could pay it off right at retirement, right in 2035. And now I know you might be seeing her interest rate and thinking, well, it's the math works better if she invests. If she gets 6, 7, 8% average or more, obviously she's better off. So you could definitely make that case. Totally get that. However, in her case, the psychological and emotional side was pretty powerful. She didn't want debt hanging over her head in retirement, was very, very strongly against having a mortgage payment in retirement. So we said, okay, let's see if we can make this work. What does this do? So let's put our debt strategy in there. Now let's refresh it. That brings us to 92%. So we've gone from 30% to 92% by just making what feel like a couple of small tweaks, but in reality have a lot of impact. And if we go to, now let's take a look at the actual numbers though, because I always like to look at this. We can look at all her numbers on the screen, and just going back to the original, we were looking at this in the waterfall, her income, her expenses, taxes, savings a lot higher now, but now she doesn't have 21,000 in disposable income. Now it's tightened down to 3,500. So now we've optimized this a lot. We've given every dollar a job. And that's the great part about planning. That's what I like to see. We got a plan coming together here. We can see her income up until age 60. Obviously, it's increasing with inflation. And then at 60, here's that part-time income. And she's working part-time, maybe 4 years, and then we have her stopping. But in reality, we can make all kinds of different adjustments. She could continue working part-time in some fashion, maybe over these next couple years if she wants to, or maybe not. And then Social Security comes on at age 67, and that goes throughout the rest of her lifespan at 90. And now what you're looking at age 60 over here at net flows, this is the withdrawal she has to make. So she's taking $54,000 to make up the difference between her expenses and her part-time retirement work. And then we see how her withdrawals change every year. And I actually like to look at it like this. So if you look at her assets, this is what we're starting with: her contributions, her savings, employer match, and I'm throwing a random mix of portfolio returns. I don't like looking at portfolio returns in a linear fashion, just straight average every year, because they don't work like that in real life. So let's throw her, what I'm giving is investment statistics starting in the year 2001, the worst time to start as an investor. So right out of the gate, she has 2 negative years off the bat, probably rethinking the whole strategy. But she sticks to her plan, investment returns come back on track, including her contributions. She hits 1.1 million by 57. I'm throwing a curveball, a 2008 type year in here, just to show that it can happen. Would it wreck her whole plan? Well, let's see what happens. She doesn't panic, stays on track, keeps contributing. She's close back up to 1.1 million by the time she hits 60. Then she starts making her withdrawals. And now she's making varying levels of withdrawals, increasing with inflation. She has those 3 gap years here where maybe she's not working at all, or maybe she wants to do more things. Maybe she just wants to spend on things that matter to her. Of course, we want to match these to her values and what's important in her life. That's the fun part about planning. That's what money should be spent on. And then once she hits 67, you can see her net cash flows, her withdrawals dropping, because now she has Social Security to fill the gap. So now she's taking only maybe 50,000, 53,000, and then that's increasing with inflation. But if you notice her returns and her ending balance, she's still getting various random returns because that's how investment returns go. She still has some negative years in here. The parentheses are negative years. But even with that, her portfolio is either maintaining or continuing to grow. By the time she hits 75, she's taking RMDs. We're just assuming she's spending all of this money, which in reality, most retirees may not spend all this. But we're just for the sake of the illustration, we're assuming it's all getting spent and enjoyed. And then this is running up until age 90. And as you can see, at age 90, she has more at the end than she started with, which goes back to my whole point about the whole Monte Carlo score. If you're at around a 90%, 90 to 100%, even maybe 85%, you're probably not spending enough and there's room to adjust. So given that, what if she retires earlier? What if she retires at 58 and maybe she just works part-time sooner? Could she do that? Well, given all the other adjustments we made, she would still have an 81% probability score, which, as I illustrated before, should be more than enough given adjustments being made. And what we'd actually be doing throughout retirement, is I'm going to go back to her assets here, is in all these given years, we're going to be making adjustments year to year. So by the time she hits 60, we'll be looking at her assets and saying, okay, what should we be doing? What should how should our withdrawals change? Is this still sufficient? Should we be using a different strategy? Should we use a guardrail strategy instead of just inflation adjusted spending, which is actually probably more realistic in retirement? But more importantly, we're monitoring and making adjustments to the plan instead of just relying on this one projection to say, okay, well, if things go this way, then maybe it'll work out. But in all reality, we're going to make adjustments to it and tailor it year by year to make sure she's okay. And so now Sarah has a plan that actually brings her confidence. She doesn't feel like she's behind in retirement. She can actually feel like, hey, this can definitely work for me. And as you can see, she might even be able to retire earlier than she thought. So she went from just feeling defeated, feeling nervous, to now actually feeling like she's on track. And that's the whole goal. And so just by making those adjustments, just by boosting savings, even eliminating debt in her case, and most importantly, staying growth oriented throughout her 50s and during retirement, having a bridge income strategy where she can work part-time from age 60 and beyond if she wanted to. And then of course, the most important part, reviewing that plan annually and making adjustments where we need to. I don't like to put too much significance on the software and say, well, the software says this. Software is just a tool. The software is dependent on the inputs that you put into it, the assumptions, and the skill of the person interpreting the software. So we don't want to just rely blindly on software. We want to make sure we're renewing annually, we're making those adjustments, we're making those improvements when we can and tailoring it. And then most importantly, she's being disciplined and sticking to the plan, not trying to time the market, not abandoning the plan if the market isn't going very well. So she's doing her part and sticking to the plan and making sure that she's following it. And so now that you saw the exact plan that we used for Sarah and many others like her to help her be able to have confidence to retire at 60, starting with $500,000 at age 50, it wasn't about just chasing an arbitrary number or just getting to $1 million. It was about reclaiming confidence through structure, flexibility, and a tailored strategy. If you want to build your own early retirement plan, click the link in the description below the video. There'll be a quick questionnaire. Fill it out. I will give you a personalized video giving you my thoughts on your retirement situation and some steps that you can take to possibly improve. If I can help, just let me know. Thanks again, as always, for watching, and I will see you in the next one.